Have you ever noticed how the most powerful forces in nature work silently? Water doesn't announce itself as it shapes stone. Roots don't trumpet their strength as they break through concrete. Seeds don't boast as they push through soil towards sunlight. The same is true for one of humanity's most transformative qualities, perseverance. Today, we're exploring what I call unseen strength, the quiet, persistent power that transforms ordinary people into extraordinary achievers, not through dramatic moments, but through countless small acts of continuation when continuation feels impossible. Think about the Grand Canyon for a moment. Standing at its edge, you witness one of Earth's most magnificent spectacles. Layers of rock carved into breathtaking formations, a testament to unimaginable power. Yet this masterpiece wasn't created by earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. It was shaped by water, moving persistently, relentlessly, over millions of years. Each drop that flowed through that canyon seemed insignificant. No single raindrop could claim credit for the marvel before us. But collectively, through endless repetition, through showing up day after day, year after year, century after century, water accomplished what brute force never could. This is the essence of what we'll explore together in this journey through unseen strength. We live in a world obsessed with the spectacular, the dramatic, the instant. We celebrate viral sensations, overnight successes, and sudden breakthroughs. We watch awards ceremonies honoring final achievements, while the years of struggle that preceded them remain hidden in shadow. We scroll through social media feeds filled with highlight reels, carefully curated moments of triumph, while the unglamorous hours of practice, failure, and persistence are edited out of the story entirely. But here's what those edited narratives miss. The real magic doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens in the quiet moments when no one is watching, when the cameras are off, when there's no audience to applaud your efforts. It happens at 5 in the morning, when you wake up to work on your dream before heading to your day job. It happens on the 100th attempt when the first 99 have failed. It happens in the private decision to try again when every logical reason tells you to quit. This is where transformation truly begins, not in the moments we celebrate, but in the moments we endure. Consider, for a moment, your own life. Think about the skills you possess right now, the knowledge you carry, the person you've become. How did you get here? Was it through a single dramatic event? Or was it through thousands of small decisions, tiny improvements, incremental steps forward? When you learned to read, it wasn't a sudden revelation. You started with letters, then sounds, then words, then sentences. Each seemed small and insignificant, but they accumulated into a capability so fundamental that you now use it without conscious thought. You probably don't remember the specific day you became a reader, yet somewhere in that gradual process, transformation occurred. This pattern repeats itself throughout human achievement. The concert pianist, whose fingers dance across keys with effortless grace, spent years practicing scales that felt mechanical and frustrating. The entrepreneur whose company now employs hundreds made countless phone calls that ended in rejection, pitched ideas that were dismissed, and faced failures that nearly broke them. The scientist, whose discovery changed medicine, conducted experiment after experiment that yielded nothing, followed dead ends, and questioned whether they were wasting their time. What separated these individuals from those who gave up wasn't superior talent, better luck, or more favorable circumstances. It was their willingness to continue when continuation seemed pointless. Yet our culture rarely prepares us for this reality. From childhood, we're fed stories with clear beginnings, middles, and ends. The hero faces a challenge, struggles briefly, then triumphs. The movie montage condenses years of training into 3 minutes of inspiring music. The biography focuses on the breakthrough moment while condensing decades of preparation into a brief paragraph. These narratives serve their purpose as entertainment, but they create dangerous misconceptions about how real achievement actually works. They make us believe that if we're not seeing results quickly, we must be doing something wrong. They convince us that struggle means we're on the wrong path, rather than exactly where we need to be. The truth is far less glamorous, but infinitely more empowering. Real progress rarely feels like progress while it's happening. It feels like showing up to the blank page again, even though yesterday's writing session felt like pulling teeth. It feels like going to the gym when your muscles ache and your motivation is gone. It feels like studying material you don't understand, applying for opportunities you probably won't get, and building something that might never work. It feels, most of the time, like nothing is happening at all. And that's exactly when perseverance matters most, not when you can see the finish line, but when you can't even be sure you're moving forward. This is what makes unseen strength so challenging and so vital. It requires operating without immediate feedback, without constant validation, without visible proof that your efforts are paying off. It demands that you trust in a process when outcomes remain uncertain. It asks you to believe that your small, seemingly insignificant actions today are accumulating into something meaningful, even when you have no evidence to support that belief. This isn't blind optimism or naive hope. It's a clear-eyed understanding of how lasting change actually occurs in the real world, gradually, quietly, and almost invisibly, until suddenly it's not invisible anymore. Unseen strength isn't about grand gestures or visible heroics. It's the decision to show up on day 487 when no one's watching and progress feels invisible. It's the writer who adds another paragraph when their manuscript has been rejected 12 times. It's the student who opens the textbook again after failing the exam. It's the entrepreneur who makes one more call after 100 rejections. This strength is unseen for two reasons. First, it happens in private moments. In the early morning hours, the late nights, the moments between visible success when others have looked away. Second, its effects are cumulative and often invisible until suddenly they're not. Like compound interest, perseverance builds silently until it reaches a tipping point. Let's examine what this actually looks like in practice, because understanding the anatomy of unseen strength helps us recognize it in ourselves and cultivate it intentionally. Imagine a woman named Sarah who decides she wants to become a software developer. She's 35, working full-time in retail management, with 2 children at home. Her decision doesn't come with a spotlight or a cheering crowd. It comes on a Tuesday evening after the kids are in bed, when she opens her laptop and starts a free online coding course. That first lesson feels exciting, filled with possibility and motivation. But here's what the story of overnight success never tells you. What happens on day 15, day 47, day 233? On day 15, Sarah is tired. She's been working 9-hour shifts, came home to help with homework, made dinner, and cleaned the kitchen. Her daughter has a cold and kept everyone up the previous night. The coding lesson waiting on her laptop feels like just another obligation on an already overwhelming list. She could skip tonight. No one would know. No one is tracking her progress or holding her accountable. This is the first test of unseen strength, and it happens not once, but repeatedly. The decision she makes in this moment, when exhaustion battles commitment, when comfort tempts her away from difficulty, determines everything that follows. She opens the laptop. She works through one lesson, even though her mind feels foggy and the concepts aren't clicking as easily as they did when she was fresh. This isn't heroic. It's not even particularly impressive to anyone watching. But it's everything. Fast forward to day 47. Sarah has hit her first real wall. The material has gotten harder. She spent 3 hours last night trying to debug a program and couldn't figure out what was wrong. She feels stupid. She's starting to question whether this was ever realistic. People younger than her, without her responsibilities, with computer science degrees and years of experience, are competing for the same jobs she hopes to get. What made her think she could catch up? This is the second test of unseen strength, and it's more insidious than simple tiredness. This is doubt, the quiet voice that whispers she's wasting her time, that she should be realistic, that some dreams aren't meant for people in her circumstances. Here's what unseen strength looks like in this moment. She doesn't silence that voice with confident affirmations. She doesn't suddenly feel certain of success. She simply decides that doubt isn't a good enough reason to stop. She posts her buggy code in an online forum asking for help. She admits she's stuck. She asks a question that might make her look foolish to more experienced developers. This act of continuing despite uncertainty, of being willing to appear incompetent in service of learning, is far more powerful than any moment of breakthrough genius. By day 233, something subtle has shifted. Sarah still struggles. She still has moments of doubt. But she's also noticed something. Problems that would have stopped her for days 3 months ago now take her an hour to solve. Code that looked like an alien language now makes sense most of the time. She's built 3 small projects on her own. They're not impressive compared to what professional developers create, but they work. She created something from nothing using skills she didn't have 8 months ago. More importantly, she's developed something far more valuable than coding ability. She's proven to herself that she's someone who continues. She's accumulated evidence through hundreds of small decisions that she doesn't quit when things get hard. This self-knowledge will serve her far beyond this particular goal. This is what unseen strength actually looks like, and it's crucial to understand why it remains invisible for so long. Our brains are wired to recognize dramatic change. When something shifts suddenly or significantly, we notice. But we're remarkably bad at perceiving gradual transformation. If you see someone every day, you won't notice them aging or changing. But if you see them once a year, the difference is striking. Your skills and capabilities develop the same way. When you're in the midst of building them, practicing daily, struggling repeatedly, it feels like you're standing still. The frustration you feel today looks identical to the frustration you felt last month, so you assume nothing has changed. But someone who saw you 3 months ago would recognize immediately how far you've come. Consider the writer facing their 12th rejection letter. To them, this feels like confirmation of failure, evidence that they're not good enough, proof that they should give up. But here's what they can't see from inside their own experience. The manuscript they submitted after rejection 11 is significantly better than the one they sent after rejection 3. Each rejection prompted revision. Each revision taught them something about craft, structure, or clarity. The rejections themselves, painful as they are, have been shaping them into a better writer. But this improvement isn't dramatic enough to feel real in the moment. It accumulates in tiny increments. A sharper sentence here, a more compelling character there, a plot hole fixed, a theme clarified. None of these individual improvements feels like the difference between rejection and acceptance. Yet, collectively, they represent transformation. Research in psychology consistently shows something remarkable. Persistence predicts success more reliably than talent, intelligence, or even opportunity. Psychologist Angela Duckworth calls this grit, the combination of passion and sustained persistence toward long-term goals. But here's what makes perseverance truly powerful. It's available to everyone. You can't choose your IQ at birth. You can't always choose your circumstances, but you can choose to continue. That's the democratizing beauty of perseverance. It doesn't discriminate. Consider Thomas Edison's famous quote about the light bulb. "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." What looks like genius from the outside was actually relentless continuation from the inside. This finding challenges everything our culture teaches us about success. We've built entire industries around the myth of natural talent. We identify gifted children early, place them in advanced programs, and assume their future success is predetermined by their innate abilities. We watch athletes perform seemingly superhuman feats and attribute their achievements to genetic advantages. We observe brilliant entrepreneurs and credit their success to exceptional intelligence or vision. These narratives feel satisfying because they explain success in simple terms. Someone succeeded because they were born special, born different, born with advantages the rest of us lack. But the research tells a different, more empowering story. When Duckworth and her colleagues studied cadets at West Point, they wanted to understand who would make it through the grueling summer training program known as Beast Barracks. They had access to every metric the military used for selection. SAT scores, physical fitness assessments, leadership potential ratings, and a measure West Point itself created called the whole candidate score. With all this data, they could predict who would succeed, right? Wrong. None of these measures predicted completion rates, as accurately as a simple assessment Duckworth created to measure grit. The cadets who scored highest on questions about persistence and passion for long-term goals were the ones most likely to finish, regardless of their test scores or athletic abilities. Talent mattered less than tenacity. This pattern repeats across domains. Studies of spelling bee champions found that grittier kids, not smarter ones, went furthest in competition. Research on sales professionals showed that persistence predicted performance better than extroversion, a trait many consider essential for sales success. Analysis of Ivy League undergraduate students revealed that self-control predicted academic performance more powerfully than IQ scores. Time and again, when researchers look beyond surface-level markers of ability and examine who actually achieves difficult goals, they find that staying power matters more than starting advantages. But why does this matter so much? Because it fundamentally reframes what's possible for each of us. If success were primarily determined by fixed traits we're born with, then our futures would be largely predetermined. Those blessed with high intelligence, natural athleticism, or advantageous circumstances would succeed, while everyone else would face insurmountable barriers. This worldview is not only depressing, it's inaccurate. The reality is far more hopeful and far more challenging. It's more hopeful because it means anyone can develop the capacity for achievement through persistent effort. It's more challenging because it removes our excuses. We can't blame our limitations on factors beyond our control when the most important factor is entirely within our control: the decision to keep going. Let's return to Edison and his 10,000 attempts. We remember this quote because it reframes failure in a useful way, but we often miss the deeper implication. Edison wasn't just being optimistic or putting a positive spin on disappointment. He was describing his actual methodology. Each failed attempt wasn't wasted effort, it was data collection. He systematically eliminated materials that wouldn't work, narrowing the field of possibilities with each experiment. His genius wasn't in seeing the solution others missed. His genius was in being willing to test thousands of possibilities that others would have abandoned as hopeless. He simply refused to interpret repeated failure as a signal to quit. This distinction is crucial. We often think of talented people as those who succeed easily, who grasp concepts quickly, who make the difficult look effortless. But this perspective confuses performance with practice. Yes, some people learn certain skills more quickly than others. Yes, genetic variations create different starting points. But the distance between starting points is trivial compared to the distance anyone can travel through persistent effort. A person with moderate natural aptitude who works consistently for 10 years will vastly outperform a naturally gifted person who practices sporadically for the same period. The advantage of talent is real, but surprisingly small when measured against the advantage of persistence. Consider two students learning piano. Student A has what teachers call a natural ear for music. She can hear a melody once and play it back with remarkable accuracy. Student B struggles with this. He needs to hear things multiple times and work them out slowly. In their first year, Student A advances much faster. She's clearly more talented. But Student A also gets bored easily because things come naturally to her. She hasn't had to develop patience with difficulty. When she encounters pieces that challenge her, she gets frustrated and moves on to something easier. Student B, meanwhile, is accustomed to struggle. He expects things to be hard. When he encounters a difficult passage, he doesn't interpret it as evidence of his inadequacy. It's just Tuesday. He breaks it down, practices it slowly, works on it section by section. 5 years later, Student B is the better pianist. His accumulated practice time dwarfs hers, and he's developed not just technical skill, but the psychological resilience that comes from pushing through difficulty repeatedly. This is the pattern that plays out across human achievement. Initial advantages matter less than sustained effort over time. The person who writes every day, even when the words come slowly, eventually produces more and better work than the naturally gifted writer who only writes when inspiration strikes. The athlete who shows up for every practice, who does the conditioning work that isn't glamorous, who studies film and works on weaknesses, outperforms the physically gifted athlete who coasts on natural ability. Here's the challenging truth about perseverance. Most of the time, you can't see it working. Imagine pushing a boulder up a hill. For hours, days, maybe months, the boulder doesn't budge. You're applying force, you're trying, but nothing visible is happening. Then suddenly movement. The boulder shifts, then rolls, then accelerates. What happened? Were you only effective in that final moment? No. Every push mattered. Every effort contributed. The early pushes weren't wasted. They were necessary. They were loosening the boulder's foundation, building your strength, teaching you the optimal angle to push. This is the challenge of perseverance, continuing when you can't see results. It requires faith not in guaranteed outcomes, but in the value of the process itself. This paradox of invisible progress represents perhaps the greatest psychological barrier to sustained effort. Our brains are sophisticated feedback machines, constantly evaluating whether our actions are producing desired effects. This served our ancestors well. If you spent energy hunting in an area with no game, you needed to recognize quickly that your efforts weren't working and redirect them elsewhere. If you planted crops in poor soil, you needed to see the failing plants and adjust your strategy. This ability to read feedback and adjust accordingly kept humans alive. But it creates a profound problem when applied to goals that require long-term persistence before results become visible. The fitness journey provides a perfect example of this paradox. Someone decides to get in shape. They're motivated, committed, ready for change. They start exercising regularly, eating better, doing everything the experts recommend. After 2 weeks, they step on the scale. Nothing. Maybe they've lost a pound, maybe gained one from water weight fluctuation. They look in the mirror. They see the same body they've always seen. Their clothes fit the same way. Every bit of feedback they can measure tells them nothing is happening. This is the moment where most people quit. They interpret the absence of visible results as evidence that their efforts aren't working. But here's what's actually happening beneath the surface, where they can't see it. Their cardiovascular system is already adapting. Their heart is becoming more efficient at pumping blood. Their muscles are developing more mitochondria, the cellular powerhouses that generate energy. Their body is beginning to shift its metabolism, becoming more effective at using fat for fuel. Neural pathways are forming that make the movements feel less awkward and more natural. Dozens of physiological changes are occurring, but none of them are visible yet. The feedback they're using to evaluate their progress, the scale, the mirror, the fit of their clothes, lags weeks or even months behind the actual biological changes taking place. They're succeeding invisibly, but because they can't see it, they assume they're failing. This lag between effort and visible outcome appears everywhere meaningful change occurs. The entrepreneur who spends months building a business sees no revenue, no customers, no validation that their idea works. What they can't see is that each conversation, each prototype iteration, each market research session is teaching them critical lessons about their customer and refining their offering. The learning is invisible but essential. When customers finally start arriving, it will appear sudden from the outside, as if the business became successful overnight. But that sudden success was built on months of invisible foundation laying. The writer faces this paradox acutely. They sit down to write every day, producing pages that feel clumsy and inadequate. They compare their work to published authors and find themselves lacking. What they can't perceive is that each sentence they write, no matter how awkward, is training their brain in the patterns of storytelling. They're developing an instinct for pacing, an ear for dialogue, a sense of structure. These capabilities don't develop dramatically or suddenly. They accumulate imperceptibly, like sediment settling at the bottom of a riverbed. After a year of daily writing, they'll look back at their early work and be shocked by how much they've improved. But during that year, they probably felt like they were making no progress at all. Scientists call this phenomenon the plateau of latent potential. You can work on something for extended periods without seeing results, not because your efforts are ineffective, but because you're building potential that hasn't manifested yet. Think of ice warming from 25 degrees to 31 degrees. Nothing appears to change. The ice remains ice. But at 32 degrees, transformation occurs. The ice melts. An observer seeing only the final degree of temperature change might conclude that only that last degree mattered, that the previous warming was irrelevant. But of course, without all the warming that preceded it, that final degree would have accomplished nothing. Every degree of temperature increase was necessary. Only the last one was visible. This creates a cruel psychological trap. When you're in the plateau period, pushing hard but seeing no results, every fiber of your being wants to interpret this as failure. Your brain, designed to conserve energy and avoid wasting effort on ineffective strategies, sends you signals to stop. This isn't working, it tells you. Try something else. Give up. These signals feel like wisdom, like rational assessment of reality. But they're actually your brain's inability to perceive the invisible progress you're making. The only way through is to develop what might be called process faith. Trust not in guaranteed outcomes, but in the inherent value of continued effort. This kind of faith sounds mystical, but it's actually quite practical. It means shifting your evaluation criteria from outcomes to actions. Instead of asking, am I seeing results, you ask, am I doing the work? Instead of measuring success by external markers that lag behind your actual progress, you measure it by whether you showed up and put in the effort. This isn't self-delusion or participation trophy thinking. It's recognizing that outcomes are delayed indicators of effort, and during the delay period, all you can control is the effort itself. The boulder metaphor captures this perfectly because it acknowledges both the reality of the plateau and the necessity of continued effort during it. When you push that boulder and nothing happens, you're not failing. You're applying force that will eventually matter. Your muscles are growing stronger with each push, even if the boulder stays still. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, illustrates this with a powerful concept. If you improve by just 1% each day, by the end of a year, you'll be 37 times better than when you started. Conversely, if you decline by 1% daily, you'll decline nearly to zero. Unseen strength operates on this compound principle. Each small action, each page written, each workout completed, each skill practiced, seems insignificant in isolation. But these actions stack, multiply, and eventually create transformation that appears sudden to outside observers, but was actually incremental all along. The bamboo tree provides a perfect metaphor. After planting, it shows no visible growth for up to 5 years. Then, in just 6 weeks, it grows 90 feet tall. Was the growth sudden? No. For 5 years, it was developing an extensive root system underground, unseen but essential. The mathematics of compound growth reveals something counterintuitive about how change actually works. We tend to think linearly. If I improve by 1 unit today and 1 unit tomorrow, I should be 2 units better. This linear thinking makes sense for many aspects of our lives. If you save $10 today and $10 tomorrow, you have $20. Simple addition. But skill development, habit formation, and personal transformation don't follow linear patterns. They follow exponential ones. Each improvement you make doesn't just add to your previous level. It multiplies it, creating a foundation upon which future improvements build more readily. Consider someone learning a language. On day 1, they learn 10 words. On day 2, they learn 10 more words. Linear thinking suggests they now know 20 words, which is true, but it misses something crucial. Those first 10 words don't just sit in isolation. They combine with the second 10 words to create possible sentences, combinations, and patterns. 20 words don't give you twice the communicative ability of 10 words. They give you exponentially more possibilities. Add grammar rules, verb conjugations, and common phrases. And suddenly those 20 words become the foundation for hundreds of possible expressions. Each new element doesn't just add to the system. It interacts with everything already there, creating compound effects. This principle explains why learning often feels frustratingly slow at the beginning and then suddenly accelerates. When you're starting any new skill, Each piece of knowledge stands relatively alone. You're learning isolated facts, disconnected techniques, separate concepts. Progress feels linear and slow because you're building without much existing foundation. But as your knowledge base grows, new information has more places to connect. That 20th guitar chord is easier to learn than the second one because you now understand finger positioning, muscle memory, and music theory. Each new chord leverages all the previous learning, making acquisition faster and retention stronger. The same compound effect works in reverse, which is why small negative habits are so dangerous. Missing one workout feels inconsequential. Your fitness doesn't collapse from a single skip session, but that one missed workout makes the next one slightly easier to skip. The momentum of your habit weakens. Your identity as someone who exercises becomes a little less certain. The physical deconditioning begins imperceptibly. One missed workout might cost you 1% of your progress, barely noticeable. But if that becomes a pattern, those 1% losses compound. After weeks or months, you've lost not just the sum of those individual sessions, but the momentum, the habit strength, and the identity that was forming. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. The person who exercises moderately 3 times per week for a year will see dramatically better results than someone who exercises intensely for a month, stops for 2 months, then starts again. The first person benefits from compound growth. Each workout builds on the previous one. Their body adapts progressively. Their habit strengthens continuously. The second person keeps resetting to zero, losing the compound benefit. They might work harder in their active periods, but they never build the foundation that allows those efforts to multiply. The bamboo tree metaphor illuminates another crucial aspect of compound growth, the importance of invisible preparation. When you plant bamboo, you water it, you care for it, you do everything right, and nothing happens. Year 1 passes with no visible growth. Year 2, still nothing above ground. By year 3, most people would assume the seed was dead, that their efforts were wasted. The temptation to give up becomes overwhelming. Why keep watering something that shows no signs of life? But beneath the surface, something extraordinary is happening. The bamboo is developing a root system so extensive and strong that it can support rapid vertical growth when the time comes. Those 5 years of apparent inactivity were years of essential development. Human endeavors follow this same pattern. The student spending years in medical school isn't immediately healing patients. The apprentice learning a craft isn't immediately creating masterpieces. The entrepreneur building a business isn't immediately profitable. These periods of preparation, training, and foundation building often feel frustrating precisely because the results remain invisible. Society judges success by visible outcomes. So during these preparation phases, you appear to be accomplishing nothing. Friends and family ask when you'll finish, when you'll start making money, when you'll have something to show for your efforts. The external pressure to produce visible results before your foundation is ready can be intense. But here's what makes the bamboo metaphor so powerful. That explosive 6-week growth period is only possible because of the 5 years of root development. If the bamboo tried to grow tall in year 1, it would topple in the first wind. The roots wouldn't be extensive enough to support its height, to gather sufficient nutrients, to anchor it against storms. The waiting isn't wasted time, it's necessary preparation. When the bamboo finally shoots upward, it grows 90 feet not despite the 5-year wait, but because of it. Let's be honest about something difficult. Perseverance often feels lonely. Our culture celebrates overnight success stories while ignoring the years of grinding that preceded them. Social media shows us highlight reels, not the unglamorous middle chapters where most people quit. When you're persevering through the unsexy middle period, when you're still learning, still failing, still far from your goal, you might feel invisible. Friends may lose interest in hearing about your journey. Family might question your choices. You might question them yourself. This is where unseen strength truly proves itself. It's one thing to persist when people are cheering. It's another to persist in silence, doubt, and obscurity. That's when you discover what you're really made of. The loneliness of perseverance isn't just an unfortunate side effect. It's an inevitable feature of pursuing anything worthwhile. When you start a new endeavor, enthusiasm runs high. People are excited for you. They ask questions, offer encouragement, express genuine interest in your progress. This initial support feels wonderful, but it carries a hidden danger. You begin to associate your effort with this external validation. The encouragement fuels your motivation. The questions make you feel accountable. The interest confirms that what you're doing matters. Then, as weeks turn into months, and you're still in the middle of your journey, with no dramatic results to report, something shifts. The questions become less frequent. When people do ask how it's going, you can hear the subtle impatience in their voice, the unspoken question of when you'll finally have something impressive to show. Your answer, that you're still working on it, still learning, still making incremental progress, sounds disappointing even to your own ears. You start noticing eyes glazing over when you talk about your project. Friends stop asking altogether, not out of malice, but because the story has gotten repetitive. You're still doing that thing, still working toward that goal, still somewhere in the middle with no clear end in sight. The narrative isn't interesting anymore because nothing dramatic is happening. This social withdrawal of attention creates a peculiar psychological challenge. You realize that you've been drawing more motivation from external validation than you recognized. When someone expressed excitement about your goal, it made the goal feel more real, more legitimate, more worthy of pursuit. Now, without that reflection, you're left alone with your own conviction, and conviction without reinforcement starts to feel uncomfortably close to delusion. You begin wondering if everyone else sees something you're missing. Maybe they've quietly concluded that your goal is unrealistic. Maybe their silence is polite skepticism. Maybe you're the only one who still believes this matters. Family presents a different but equally challenging dynamic. They love you and want you to succeed, which paradoxically can make their doubt more painful than a stranger's skepticism. When your mother asks if you've considered a more stable path, she's not trying to undermine you. She's genuinely worried. She sees you working long hours for no immediate return. She watches you sacrifice comfort, security, and conventional markers of success for something that remains stubbornly hypothetical. Her concern is love expressed through anxiety, but it still plants seeds of doubt. When your father mentions someone your age who just got promoted at their corporate job, he's not intentionally making you feel inadequate. He's processing his own confusion about why you've chosen a harder path. But the comparison lands like criticism regardless of intent. The internal questioning becomes even more insidious than external doubt. At least when others question your choices, you can defend them, which paradoxically strengthens your resolve. But when you question yourself in the quiet hours, there's no one to argue against except your own spiraling thoughts. You've been working on this project for 8 months now. What do you have to show for it? Others have succeeded faster. Maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe you're wasting time you could spend on more realistic pursuits. Maybe persistence in your case isn't determination, but denial. These thoughts don't arrive with fanfare. They seep in gradually, eroding confidence, so slowly you don't notice until you're standing on significantly shakier ground than where you started. Social media amplifies this isolation in cruel ways. You scroll through feeds seeing peers announcing promotions, launching products, achieving milestones. Each post represents someone else's highlight reel, but your brain doesn't process it that way. You don't see the years of work behind their success. You don't see their failures, doubts, and unsexy middle periods. You just see the outcome and compare it to your current process. They're crossing finish lines while you're still grinding away in obscurity. The comparison is fundamentally unfair. Their results versus your journey in progress. But it feels devastatingly real in the moment. You feel simultaneously behind and invisible, irrelevant in a world that only celebrates visible achievement. This is the crucible where unseen strength is forged. When external validation disappears, when social support withdraws, when even your own confidence wavers, continuing anyway requires something different from motivation or enthusiasm. It requires a deeper commitment to the process itself, independent of outcomes or recognition. This isn't about positive thinking or mantras. It's about examining why you started this journey and deciding whether those reasons remain valid even if no one else understands or cares. It's about divorcing your sense of worth from immediate results and anchoring it instead to the person you're becoming through sustained effort. The loneliness of this period serves a purpose, though it rarely feels purposeful at the time. It strips away all the superficial reasons you might have started. If you are pursuing this goal to impress others, their disinterest will stop you. If you needed constant encouragement to continue, its absence will derail you. If you are chasing a fantasy rather than accepting the grinding reality, the unsexy middle will disillusion you. What remains after everything superficial falls away is the core of your commitment. The people who make it through this lonely middle period emerge with something invaluable. Certainty that their motivation is intrinsic, that their commitment doesn't depend on external validation, that they can sustain effort even in silence and doubt. This doesn't mean loneliness stops hurting or that isolation becomes easy. The good news? Perseverance isn't fixed. It's a muscle you can develop. Here are practical ways to strengthen it. Reframe failure as data. Each setback teaches you something. Ask yourself not why did I fail, but what did I learn? Focus on process, not just outcomes. Find satisfaction in the work itself, not just the results. The novelist learns to love writing, not just having written. Create systems, not just goals. Goals are about results you want to achieve. Systems are about processes you commit to following. Systems sustain you when motivation fades. Connect to purpose beyond yourself. Perseverance becomes easier when it's about something larger than personal success. What cause or community drives you? Celebrate invisible milestones. You don't need external validation to acknowledge your progress. Mark day 30, day 100, day 365 of showing up. Find your anchor. Identify what keeps you grounded when storms come. It might be a morning ritual, a mentor's words, or a vision board that reminds you why you started. Understanding that perseverance is trainable rather than innate fundamentally changes how we approach difficult endeavors. If you believe perseverance is something you either have or don't have, then facing your first major obstacle becomes evidence of your inadequacy. But if you understand that perseverance develops through practice, like physical strength develops through exercise, then obstacles become opportunities to build capacity. The person who struggles to persist isn't deficient. They're simply untrained in a skill that improves with intentional practice. Reframing failure as data represents perhaps the most powerful cognitive shift you can make. Our natural response to failure is emotional. Disappointment, shame, frustration, self-doubt. These emotions aren't wrong, but they're not particularly useful if they're all we extract from the experience. When you ask, why did I fail, you're often seeking someone or something to blame, including yourself. This question leads to rumination rather than improvement. But when you ask, what did I learn, you transform failure from a referendum on your worth into information about your approach. The experiment that doesn't work isn't a waste. It's data showing you what doesn't work, which narrows your search for what does. The pitch that gets rejected isn't proof you lack talent. It's feedback about what this particular audience needed that you didn't provide. This reframe doesn't eliminate the sting of failure, but it gives you something productive to do with that sting besides dwelling on it. Focusing on process over outcomes addresses a fundamental problem with goal-oriented thinking. Goals are valuable for setting direction, but they make terrible daily motivators because they're always in the future, always not yet achieved. If your satisfaction depends entirely on reaching the goal, you condemn yourself to dissatisfaction throughout the entire journey. The writer who only feels good about writing when they've published a novel will feel bad about writing for years, possibly forever if publication never comes. But the writer who finds satisfaction in the daily act of writing, in solving the puzzle of a difficult sentence, in discovering what a character wants, in the meditative focus of sitting with their craft, remains motivated regardless of external outcomes. This isn't settling for less or abandoning ambition. It's recognizing that you'll spend far more time in the process than in achievement. So learning to value the process is essential for sustained effort. The distinction between goals and systems illuminates why New Year's resolutions fail so reliably. People set goals: lose 20 pounds, write a book, learn Spanish. Then they wait for motivation to carry them toward these goals. And when motivation inevitably fades around January 15th, their efforts collapse. Systems work differently. A system isn't about what you want to achieve. It's about what you commit to doing regardless of how you feel. The goal is to lose weight. The system is going to the gym every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 in the morning. The goal is to write a book. The system is writing 500 words before breakfast every day. The goal is to learn Spanish. The system is completing one lesson on your language app during your commute. Systems work because they don't depend on the ephemeral resource of motivation. They work because you've made the behavior automatic, something you do not because you feel like it, but because it's what you do. On days when motivation is high, the system carries you forward. On days when motivation vanishes, the system still carries you forward, and that's when it matters most. Connecting to purpose beyond yourself taps into something psychologists call self-transcendent motivation. When your goal serves only yourself, persevering through difficulty requires constantly convincing yourself that your comfort and success matter enough to justify the sacrifice. This works sometimes, but it's exhausting and fragile. When your goals serve something beyond yourself, a cause you believe in, a community you want to help, a future you want to create for others, perseverance becomes less about self-discipline and more about service. The teacher who stays late to help struggling students isn't constantly wrestling with whether it's worth the effort. The effort is obviously worth it because the students matter. The activist who persists despite setbacks isn't puzzling over whether to continue. The cause is bigger than their convenience. This doesn't mean you need to save the world. It means identifying how your efforts connect to something beyond your individual benefit, which makes persistence feel less like grinding self-improvement and more like meaningful contribution. Celebrating invisible milestones counteracts one of perseverance's cruelest features: the long periods where nothing seems to be happening. If you wait for external markers of success before acknowledging progress, you might wait months or years before feeling any sense of accomplishment. But if you create your own milestones based on process rather than outcomes, you can recognize achievement continuously. Day 30 of showing up matters regardless of what you've accomplished. It means you're someone who shows up consistently for a month, which is genuinely hard and genuinely worth recognizing. Day 100 proves you're not someone who quits when novelty fades. Day 365 demonstrates you've integrated this practice into your identity. These milestones are invisible to others because they're not outcomes. No one else knows or cares that you've shown up for your 100th consecutive day. Here's something remarkable that happens when you persevere. The goal itself becomes secondary to who you become in pursuit of it. The mountain climber doesn't just reach the summit, they become someone capable of reaching summits. The student doesn't just pass the exam, they become someone who doesn't surrender to difficulty. Every time you continue despite difficulty, you're rewriting your self-narrative. You're proving to yourself that you're someone whose commitment exceeds their circumstances. This self-knowledge, built quietly day after day, becomes unshakable. This is the hidden gift of perseverance. It transforms not just what you achieve, but your fundamental identity. You become, quite literally, a different person, one with evidence-based confidence in your own resilience. Most people begin a challenging endeavor focused entirely on the external goal. They want the degree, the promotion, the published book, the finished marathon, the successful business. The goal is the point, and everything they do is merely a means to reach it. This makes intuitive sense, but it misses the profound transformation that occurs along the journey. When you commit to something difficult and persist through the inevitable obstacles, you're not just moving toward an external achievement. You're fundamentally restructuring your understanding of who you are and what you're capable of. This internal transformation often becomes far more valuable than the external achievement that prompted it. Consider someone training for their first marathon. When they register for the race, their focus is clear. Cross the finish line in 26.2 miles. That's the goal, the measure of success, the reason for all the effort. They start training, and the early weeks are brutal. Their body hurts. They can barely run 2 miles without stopping. They wake up sore every morning. Their friends think they're crazy for voluntarily enduring this discomfort. Quitting would be so easy, so sensible, so comfortable. But they don't quit. They keep running. Slowly, their capacity increases. 5 miles becomes manageable. Then 10. Then 15. Something shifts during this process that has nothing to do with running speed or physical endurance. They start to see themselves differently. Before training began, they were someone who thought marathons were for other people, for athletes, for individuals fundamentally different from themselves. Maybe they made jokes about only running if something was chasing them. Their identity didn't include person who runs marathons. But as they accumulate weeks and months of training, as they push through days when every fiber of their being wants to stay in bed, as they complete runs they once thought impossible, their self-concept evolves. They become someone who sets ambitious goals and follows through. Someone who doesn't let discomfort dictate their choices. Someone who can commit to a long-term objective and persist through the unglamorous middle period when progress feels slow and difficulty feels constant. This identity transformation matters far more than whether they finish in 4 hours or 5, or even whether they finish at all. This is why people who achieve difficult goals often report that the achievement itself felt anticlimactic. They cross the finish line, receive their diploma, publish their book, and feel a brief surge of satisfaction followed by something unexpected. The realization that the person they became during the journey is the real prize. The marathon finisher doesn't just have a medal. They have evidence-based confidence that they can endure difficulty in service of a goal. The graduate doesn't just have a degree. They know they're someone who persists through years of challenging work. The published author doesn't just have a book. They've proven to themselves that they can sustain creative effort through countless moments of doubt and rejection. This evidence-based confidence differs fundamentally from the self-esteem movement's approach of affirming your worth regardless of accomplishment. There's nothing wrong with recognizing inherent human dignity, but that's different from confidence in your capabilities. Capability confidence comes from doing hard things repeatedly and learning through lived experience that you can handle difficulty. Each time you persist through a challenging moment, you're creating a memory that becomes evidence. The next time you face difficulty, you can reference that memory. You've done hard things before. You didn't quit when quitting seemed rational. You found resources within yourself you didn't know existed. This isn't positive thinking or wishful hope. It's factual reference to your demonstrated capacity. The self-narrative you construct through persistent action becomes surprisingly durable. Psychologists have found that our sense of identity influences behavior more powerfully than our stated goals or intentions. Someone who thinks of themselves as not a morning person will struggle to wake up early regardless of how important their goal is. But someone who has demonstrated to themselves through repeated action that they are someone who wakes up early, even when it's difficult, has fundamentally different raw material to work with. Their identity now includes evidence that they can do this hard thing, which makes continuing to do it significantly easier. This identity shift explains a phenomenon many people notice. After achieving one difficult goal, subsequent difficult goals become more achievable. It's not that the tasks themselves get easier. Running a marathon doesn't make writing a book physically easier, but both require sustained effort through difficulty, and having proven you can do that in one domain provides transferable confidence. You know from lived experience that the miserable middle period eventually gives way to progress. You know that feeling like quitting doesn't mean you should quit. You know that your discomfort in the moment is a poor predictor of your eventual capacity. This knowledge, earned through one experience of perseverance, becomes applicable across domains. The transformation also changes how you respond to failure. Someone who has persevered through difficulty and achieved something hard develops what psychologist Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset. They see failure not as evidence of fixed inadequacy, but as temporary setback in an ongoing process of development. When they fail at something new, they don't think "I can't do this," but rather "I can't do this yet." The word "yet" contains enormous power because it reframes failure from permanent state to current position in an ongoing journey. A crucial distinction: perseverance isn't the same as stubbornness. Wisdom lies in knowing when to persist and when to pivot. If you're repeatedly hitting a wall, it's worth asking, am I learning and growing, or am I simply repeating the same ineffective actions? True perseverance includes adaptability. Edison tried thousands of materials for his light bulb filament. He persevered toward the goal while remaining flexible about the method. The direction stays constant, but the path can change. Ask yourself, is this difficulty a signal to try a different approach, or is it the resistance that comes before any breakthrough? Often, the answer lies in whether you're still learning. If each attempt teaches you something new, persist. If you're just repeating patterns, it might be time to pivot. The line between productive perseverance and counterproductive stubbornness is one of the most difficult distinctions anyone pursuing a challenging goal must navigate. Both involve continuing in the face of difficulty. Both require ignoring voices that tell you to quit. Both can look identical from the outside. Yet one leads to eventual breakthrough, while the other leads to wasted years and mounting frustration. Understanding the difference isn't just helpful. It's essential for anyone committed to achieving something difficult without sacrificing their finite time and energy on approaches that will never work. Stubbornness is rigid. It says, "This is the way, and I will keep doing it this way regardless of what happens." Stubbornness mistakes consistency of method for consistency of purpose. It confuses the path with the destination. A stubborn person keeps banging their head against the same wall, expecting that eventually the wall will break if they just hit it hard enough and often enough. Sometimes this works, but often it simply results in a headache and a still intact wall. Stubbornness refuses to acknowledge feedback from reality. It treats every obstacle as something to overcome through sheer force of will rather than as potential information about whether the approach needs adjustment. Perseverance, by contrast, is flexible. It says, "This is where I'm going, and I will find a way to get there even if the path I'm currently on doesn't work." Perseverance maintains consistency of purpose while embracing flexibility of method. A persevering person who encounters a wall asks whether they should climb it, go around it, dig under it, or perhaps reconsider whether this particular wall is on the optimal path to their destination. They remain committed to the goal while staying open to adjusting their approach based on what they're learning. Perseverance treats obstacles as information. Each failed attempt teaches something about what doesn't work, which narrows the field of what might work. The key differentiator is learning. If you're attempting something repeatedly and each attempt generates new information, teaches you something you didn't know before, or helps you refine your approach, that's perseverance. You're engaged in productive iteration. Even if you haven't succeeded yet, you're making progress toward understanding what success requires. Your failures are connected by a learning curve. Each one builds on insights from the previous ones. You're not repeating the same action, expecting different results. You're conducting variations of an experiment, gathering data, and adjusting your hypothesis. But if you're attempting something repeatedly, and each attempt feels essentially identical to the last, if you're not gaining new insights or refining your approach, if you could swap attempt number 50 with attempt number 5 and not notice the difference, that's stubbornness. You've stopped learning. You're no longer engaged in productive iteration, but in mechanical repetition. This is the definition of insanity, often attributed to Einstein, doing the same thing over and over while expecting different results. When learning stops, it's time to step back and question whether you need a fundamentally different approach or perhaps even a different goal. Consider two entrepreneurs whose businesses aren't gaining traction. Entrepreneur A has been running Facebook ads for 6 months with minimal results. Each month, they analyze what worked and what didn't. They test different images, adjust their targeting, refine their messaging, try different time frames. Their ads still aren't profitable, but each iteration teaches them something new about their audience. They're discovering that their original target demographic isn't responding, but a different demographic they hadn't considered is showing interest. They're learning that certain messaging resonates while other approaches fall flat. They haven't succeeded yet, but they're accumulating valuable knowledge. This is perseverance. Entrepreneur B has also been running Facebook ads for 6 months with minimal results. Each month, they boost the same posts with the same images targeting the same audience. The results don't improve, so they conclude they need to spend more money or try harder. They're frustrated, but convinced that consistency means doing exactly the same thing regardless of outcomes. They're not analyzing what's working. They're not testing variations. They're not learning anything new about their market or their approach. This is stubbornness. They're persisting, but toward no productive end. The challenge is that in the moment, when you're deep in the struggle, distinguishing between productive difficulty and counterproductive stubbornness can be almost impossible. Both feel hard. Both require you to continue despite wanting to quit. Both involve people questioning your choices. The difference only becomes clear when you zoom out and examine the pattern over time. Are you learning? Are you adapting? Are you gathering information that informs your next attempt? Or are you mechanically repeating the same actions out of a sense that persistence requires never changing course? Another helpful question to ask yourself is whether your continued effort is based on evidence or emotion. Evidence-based persistence looks at the data and sees signs of progress, even if small. Maybe your business isn't profitable yet, but customer engagement is increasing. Maybe you haven't published your novel yet, but your writing skills have measurably improved. There's a Japanese proverb, fall 7 times, stand up 8. That's unseen strength in its essence. Not the falling, and not even the standing up, but the quiet decision, repeated again and again, to rise one more time than you've fallen. The world will often overlook your perseverance until the moment it succeeds. That's okay. Unseen strength doesn't need an audience. It doesn't require applause. It doesn't even demand certainty of success. What it requires is you showing up one more time, especially when it's hard, especially when no one's watching, especially when success feels distant. To anyone in the middle of their journey right now, pushing that boulder, feeling unseen, wondering if it matters. It does. Your quiet perseverance is powerful. Every invisible push is accumulating force. Every private decision to continue is building something that will eventually be impossible to ignore. And more importantly, you're building yourself into someone capable of moving mountains. One invisible push at a time. Keep going. Your unseen strength is real, and it's already working. The profound simplicity of that Japanese proverb captures something that volumes of motivational literature often miss. Success isn't about never falling. It's not about being so talented or prepared or fortunate that you avoid failure altogether. Success is about the unglamorous, undramatic act of getting back up after you've fallen, and doing so repeatedly until standing up becomes more habitual than staying down. The 8th time you stand up matters more than the 7 times you fell, because it demonstrates that falling hasn't defined you, hasn't defeated you, hasn't convinced you that staying down is more sensible than rising again. This message is for you if you're somewhere in the middle right now. Not at the exciting beginning, when enthusiasm runs high and possibilities feel infinite. Not at the triumphant end, when success validates all your efforts and everyone wants to hear your story. But in the middle, that long, unglamorous stretch where most people quit because there's no evidence that continuation will pay off. You're tired. You've been working at this longer than you expected. The progress you hoped to see by now hasn't materialized. The people who were initially excited for you have moved on to being excited about other things. You're starting to wonder if you're deluding yourself, if persistence in your case is less determination and more denial of reality. Here's what you need to understand. This feeling, this doubt, this exhaustion, this sense that you're invisible and your efforts don't matter, this is exactly where transformation happens. not despite these feelings, but because of them. Everyone feels excited at the beginning. Beginnings are easy. Starting is the simplest part of any journey because hope is still intact and difficulty hasn't yet revealed itself. The middle is where the real work happens because the middle is where you discover whether your commitment runs deeper than your comfort. The middle is where you find out what you're actually made of. Your perseverance right now, in this moment when no one is watching and nothing dramatic is happening, is more significant than any eventual success. The world measures achievement by outcomes, by the final result, by what you can point to and say, "I did that." But the world's measurements miss what matters most. The outcome of your efforts remains uncertain. You might succeed spectacularly. You might achieve something more modest than you hoped. You might even ultimately decide to pivot to a different goal entirely. But regardless of outcome, the person you're becoming through the act of persisting through difficulty is already real. That transformation is already happening. You're already different from the person who started this journey, and you're becoming someone even stronger with each decision to continue. Think about what you're actually doing each time you show up despite wanting to quit. You're teaching yourself that your commitments matter more than your feelings. You're proving that temporary discomfort doesn't dictate your choices. You're demonstrating that you're someone whose word to themselves means something. These aren't abstract virtues. They're practical capabilities that will serve you for the rest of your life, in this endeavor and in every challenge you'll face afterward. The mountain you're currently climbing might seem like it's about the specific goal, the degree, the business, the skill, the achievement. But it's actually teaching you how to climb mountains, and that capability transfers. Your invisible pushes against that boulder are not wasted effort. Physics tells us that every application of force has an effect, even when we can't see it. Your effort is loosening the boulder's foundation, teaching you optimal angles of approach, building your strength, developing your endurance. The fact that the boulder hasn't moved yet doesn't mean your pushes are ineffective. It means you haven't reached the tipping point yet. But here's what people who quit never discover. The tipping point only arrives for those who push long enough to reach it. Every person who gave up did, so some number of pushes before the boulder would have moved. They were closer than they realized, but they'll never know because they stopped. You don't need certainty to continue. In fact, if you wait for certainty before persisting, you'll never persist at all. Certainty comes after success, not before it. What you need instead is willingness to act without certainty, to trust that sustained effort toward a worthy goal is valuable regardless of guaranteed outcomes. This isn't blind faith. It's a clear-eyed understanding that nothing worthwhile comes with guarantees, and waiting for guarantees means never attempting anything significant. You're choosing to build something meaningful despite uncertainty, and that choice itself is powerful. The loneliness you feel is temporary, but the strength you're building is permanent. Right now, your journey feels invisible because you're in process rather than outcome. But the moment you break through, and you will break through if you continue, suddenly everyone will see what you built. They'll congratulate you on your success, and they'll mean it sincerely.